We'll ask it.
Governor Clinton, you've accused the president of coddling tyrants, including those in Beijing. As president, how would you exert U.S. power to influence affairs in China?
I think our relationships with China are important, and I don't think we want to isolate China. But I think it is a mistake for us to do what this administration did when all those kids went out there carrying the Statue of Liberty in Tiananmen Square. Mr. Bush sent two people in secret to toast the Chinese leaders and basically tell them not to worry about it. They rewarded him by opening negotiations with Iran to transfer nuclear technology. That was their response to that sort of action. Now that voices in the Congress and throughout the country have insisted that we do something about China, look what has happened. China has finally agreed to stop sending us products made with prison labor, not because we coddled them, but because the administration was pushed into doing something about it. And recently, the Chinese have announced that they're going to lower some barriers to our products, which they ought to do since they have a $15 billion trade surplus with the United States under Mr. Bush, the second biggest surplus of all, second to Japan. So I would be firm. I would say, if you want to continue most favored nations status for your government-owned industries as well as your private ones, observe human rights in the future. Open your society. Recognize the legitimacy of those kids that were carrying the Statue of Liberty. If we can stand up for our economic interests, we ought to be able to pursue the democratic interests of the people in China, and over the long run, they'll be more reliable partners.
President Bush, you have 1 minute.
Well, the administration was the first major country to stand up against the abuse in Tiananmen Square. We are the ones that worked out the prison labor deal. We are the ones that have lowered the barrier to products, but Carla Hill's negotiation. I am the one that said, let's keep the MFN because you see China moving towards a free market economy. To do what the Congress and Governor Clinton is suggesting, you would isolate and ruin Hong Kong. They are making some progress, not enough for us. We were the first ones to put sanctions on. We still have them on some things. But the Governor Clinton's philosophy is isolate them. He says don't do it, but the policies he's expounding of putting conditions on MFN and kind of humiliating them is not the way you make the kind of progress we are getting. And I've stood up with these people, and I understand what you have to do to be strong in this situation, and it's moving. Not as fast as we'd like, but you isolate China and turn them inward, and then we've made a tremendous mistake. And I'm not going to do it, and I've had to fight a lot of people that were saying human rights, and we are the ones that put the sanctions on and stood for it. And he can insult General Scowcroft if he wants to. They didn't go over to coddle. He went over to say, you must make the very changes they're making now.
1 minute, Mr. Perot.
China's a huge country, broken into many provinces. It has some very elderly leaders that will not be around too much longer. Capitalism is growing and thriving across big portions of China. Asia will be our largest trading partner in the future. It will be a growing and a closer relationship. We have a delicate, tight wire walk that we must go through at the present time to make sure that we do not cozy up to tyrants, to make sure that they don't get the impression that they can suppress their people. But time is our friend there, because their leaders will change in not too many years, worst case. And their country is making great progress. One last point on the missiles. I don't want the American people to be confused. We have written agreements, and we have some missiles that have been destroyed. But we have a huge number of intercontinental ballistic missiles that are still in place in Russia. The fact that you have an agreement is one thing. Till they're destroyed, some crazy person can either sell them or use them.
All right, the next question goes to President Bush for a 2-minute answer, and Ann will ask it.
Mr. President, how can you watch the killing in Bosnia and the ethnic cleansing or the starvation and anarchy in Somalia and not want to use America's might, if not America's military, to try to end that kind of suffering?
And both of them are very complicated situations. And I vowed something because I learned something from Vietnam. I am not going to commit U.S. forces until I know what the mission is, till the military tell me that it can be completed, until I know how they can come out. We are helping. American airplanes are helping today on humanitarian relief for Sarajevo. It is America that's in the lead in helping with humanitarian relief for Somalia. But when you go to put somebody else's son or daughter into war, I think you got to be a little bit careful, and you have to be sure that there's a military plan that can do this. You have ancient ethnic rivalries that have cropped up as Yugoslavia is dissolved or getting dissolved, and it isn't going to be solved by sending in the 82nd Airborne. And I'm not going to do that as Commander-in-Chief. I am going to stand by and use the moral persuasion of the United States to get satisfaction in terms of prison camps, and we're making some progress there, and in terms of getting humanitarian relief in there. And right now, as you know, the United States took the lead in a no-fly operation up there in a no-fly order up in the United Nations. We're working through the international organizations. That's one thing I learned by forging that tremendous and highly successful coalition against Saddam Hussein, the dictator. Work internationally to do it. I am very concerned about it. I'm concerned about ethnic cleansing. I'm concerned about attacks on Muslims, for example, over there. But I must stop short of using American force until I know how those young men and women are going to get out of there as well as get in, know what the mission is, and define it. And I think I'm on the right track.
Are you designing a mission?
Ann, sorry. Time is up. We have to go to Mr. Perot for a 1-minute response.
I think if we learned anything in Vietnam, it's you first commit this nation before you commit the troops to the battlefield. We cannot send our people all over the world to solve every problem that comes up. This is basically a problem that is a primary concern to the European community. Certainly, we care about the people, we care about the children, we care about the tragedy. But it is inappropriate for us, just because there's a problem somewhere around the world, to take the sons and daughters of working people, and make no mistake about it, our all-volunteer armed force is not made up of the sons and daughters of the beautiful people. It's the working folks who send their sons and daughters to war, with a few exceptions. Very unlike World War II, when FDR's sons flew missions. Everybody went. It's a different world now. Very important that we not just, without thinking it through, just rush to every problem in the world and have our people torn to pieces.
Governor Clinton, 1 minute.
I agree that we cannot commit ground forces to become involved in the quagmire of Bosnia or in the tribal wars of Somalia. But I think that it's important to recognize that there are things that can be done short of that, and that we do have interests there. There are, after all, 2 million refugees now because of the problems in what was Yugoslavia, the largest number since World War II. And there may be hundreds of thousands of people who will starve or freeze to death in this winter. The United States should try to work with its allies and stop it. I urge the President to support this air cover, and he did, and I applaud that. I applaud the no-fly zone, and I know that he's going back to the United Nations to try to get authority to enforce it. I think we should stiffen the embargo on the Belgrade government, and I think we have to consider whether or not we should lift the arms embargo now on the Bosnians, since they are in no way in a fair fight with a heavily armed opponent bent on ethnic cleansing. We can't get involved in the quagmire, but we must do what we can.
All right, moving on now to divisions in our country. The first question goes to Governor Clinton for 2 minutes, and Ann will ask it.
Governor Clinton, can you tell us what your definition of the word family is?
A family involves at least one parent, whether natural or adoptive, or foster, and children. A good family is a place where love and discipline and good values are transmuted from the elders to the children. A place where people turn for refuge and where they know they're the most important people in the world. America has a lot of families that are in trouble today. There's been a lot of talk about family values in this campaign. I know a lot about that. I was born to a widowed mother who gave me family values and grandparents.